Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. This, if you remember, the idea for this session came out of our one slide, one pitch discussion, where two ideas were brought up. One, let's talk more about the actual PhD application process. Many of you may be applying next cycle, or maybe you're just thinking about what is it like to apply to a PhD in the future. Luckily, we have many PhD students here in the room and online, so we're going to share our experiences. Also, conferences. What is an academic conference? How do you navigate those? How do you pick which ones to go to? How do you apply, et cetera, et cetera? So we have an hour and a half. It's a lot of time. I did brainstorm. Let me make sure nobody's trying to get in touch with me. Okay. Oh, Colorado needs to see my screen though. So we did come up with some questions between myself and the Momentum Fellows in these two kind of bucketed categories. One is on the PhD application process. The second kind of bucket is on professional conferences. We by no means need to follow this. This is informal, and this session is really for all of you to ask any and all questions related to these things. No question is too big or too small. And I guess I'll ask if anybody has any questions before we get started. Okay, so for the folks in PhD programs around the room and on Zoom, my first question has to do with the big why. Why did you decide to pursue a PhD, and how did you know it was the right path for you? I guess, do we want to start on Zoom? Colorado, do you want to unmute, or I think you're still muted.
Oh,
Oh, we can hear you. Okay.
hello.
So my first question for the PhD students in the room at Colorado, is why did you decide to pursue a PhD, and how did you know it was the right path for you?
Yeah, so for me, it was more like I was working in academic field only, where I was teaching class 12th standard, and more like it was more of a monotonous job where like I had to do the same thing every year. So I felt more like pursuing my career in the field of research, where I felt more exciting, and it was like I get to discover new things and work on new topics every time. So that was one of the reasons for me, I would say.
Great, thank you. Georgia?
Yeah, I came into it right out of undergrad and I did some undergraduate research. I enjoyed it. And I honestly just wasn't ready to like have a 9 to 5 for the rest of my life. And I wanted that student life flexibility. I wanted to continue learning. I thought there was a lot more to know before I moved on with my life outside of academia and school. Um, so yeah.
Hey, how's it go? Absolutely. Yeah, I didn't really want to go to grad school or anything before college. I have no idea what that is. I'm a first gen, so the expectation is I go to college, I finish the college, I will be a college graduate, I find a job 9 to 5, very good. That's something really lovely. In my third year, I reach out like there's this professor, she's really famous and she has this course elective class and I attended and she asked us to like do research, write papers, do coding. And then I did pretty good. And she asked me to write a paper, a conference paper. So I wrote it and I got published. And then I turned that conference paper to more journal paper. I was good. Yeah, so that's why when I know I should do it.
Great.
So I started my master's. We had a class project, which ended up being published in a journal, and my advisor just encouraged me to just to pursue more studies. That's what.
Cool. And then Akila, I don't want to forget you on Zoom.
Yeah, I can go next. So I think for me, I didn't decide doing PhD until my master's degree, and I was working on a project with a professor on computational superconductivity, and eventually I got developed interest towards modeling and some of the computational work. I really liked the professor I was working with, and then I thought I was enjoying so much learning the project I was working on, and also I like the initially I started with like a simple Fortran coding and solving simple Bessel function or simple physical equations and applying the uh, physics conditions to the climate. And so I think I really enjoyed that phase of learning small things, and it imbibed, eventually it imbibed the skills, and also I wanted to learn more and more. Then I decided why not pursuing PhD. I think that is the way it's gonna help me, and I also so much passionate about learning more towards.
Cool. I had a bit of an unconventional path to my PhD. Like I didn't really understand what it meant to be a scientist, right? So like when I was a kid, my only conceptualization of what it meant to be a scientist was like Dexter from Dexter's Laboratory. I'm like, yeah, that kid's a scientist, but I don't really know what it like means to be a career scientist. So I entered the City College of New York, which is up on 138th Street, as like an undecided science major. And I was like, yeah, maybe I'll go to medical school or something. I don't know. Like, what do you do with a degree in science? And I ended up stumbling my way into a research lab to do a similar research experience to the one many of you are in now, which focuses on tropical ecology. And the rest was kind of history. I ended up doing my undergrad and my master's degree in that lab, studying a family of wood-boring beetles in the Amazon rainforest. I got to live there. It was very cool. But I started to slowly realize that my favorite part about science is doing stuff like this. It's talking about it and not necessarily being on the bench all day, which is what a lot of being a biologist is. It's not doing the cool stuff in the field. It's a very small part about, research biology. Um, so that took me down two different roads after I graduated with my bachelor's and master's degrees in science. I founded a startup called Skinno, formerly Skinno, then it was called See Through, which focused on science communication and accessibility of science research behind consumer care products. I also joined the Fashion Institute of Technology as a faculty member, teaching science to non-science students around ecology and environmental problems. And it was through these two experiences that I started to ask these more critical questions to myself about what it means to do and learn science in the face of environmental problems, right? Because I was creating this really cool tech, which, again, helps with accessibility to science, but it felt like a band-aid to these larger systemic issues that we have in people's relationship to science. And then I was teaching my undergrads, and I'm like, wow, this is stuff they probably should have learned in their K-12 education, not from me, as, 20, 21-year-olds. So I stumbled back to City College to sit in my honors advisor's office, telling her all of this. And I was like, is there a degree in like being interested in people and how people learn and talk and understand science? I'm like, I don't think a degree like this exists. I was like, do I need like a policy degree? Do I need a second master's? And she was like, no, it's like you want a PhD in science education. And I'm like, really? It's like I don't perceive myself as an education person, right? I'm a scientist. I do science stuff. I do startup stuff. She's like, no, it's like it's a really broad category, right? It's not just people who teach in K-12 education. It's people who are interested in education really broadly speaking. I was like, okay. And that's how I ended up in my PhD program, which was in a completely different field than the one that I was in previously. But I think it melded all of my interests together from the pure sciences, my startup experience, and teaching. Cool. Okay. Second question. What did you look for when choosing programs to apply for? Was it advisors, areas of research, location, funding, etc.? I'll start with Georgia.
Location was the biggest thing for me. I only wanted to live in San Diego, and there wasn't going to be another option. So, the only there's only two universities, SDSU and UCSD. but UCSD just created their Data Science Institute like a couple years back. And so, yeah, I just applied there. And of course, having the Data Science Institute fit my research interests. And then also guaranteed 5 years of funding. So of course, all of those were taken into account, but yeah.
Wouldn't you consider Los Angeles?
I did Los Angeles already.
Ah.
I was over.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I consider reputation. Like, I think the school's name is really important. Like, some people say professor's name is more important. Maybe, and also funding. I attended USC. USC is a private university with guaranteed 5 year funding. That's good. In some other universities, it's not guaranteed for 5 years. That's it.
I think first, the advisor was very important for me, and then the location. And I think I found an advisor in University of Houston. I had 6 interviews with his postdocs and himself, and after receiving an admission, he told me you were supposed to publish 3 to 4 Q1 ISI papers a year, and I thought that I just can't do that, and I just selected to go to University of Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit like I said before, I was applying into a field that I had zero knowledge about. So for me, it was a lot of reading about like the types of work that the faculty do, right? Because I don't want to be stuck in like a science ed program where everybody just works in K-12 systems. It's not really what I'm like. I do some of that work now, but it's not really what I'm interested in. So faculty matters, like, right? Because if you could apply to like the coolest program in the coolest school, but if nobody is doing work there that aligns with your interests, then it's a little pointless. And you're also applying to a lab, right? You're applying to a research group to a lab. So you might find like the coolest research group ever, but if there's no funding for a PhD student, right, that's a problem. So this is why, reaching out to faculty ahead of time and understanding if they're even taking on new PhD students, if you were to apply, matters. Okay, Zoom. I'm kicking the can over to Zoom. Akila?
For me, being an international student, it's very important to get get funding, right? So my first preference was to get funding as well as the research interest. So if my research.
We can't hear you if you're speaking.
Okay, yeah, I'm speaking.
Oh, okay. Now we can hear you.
Okay, maybe it's Wi-Fi. Okay, it's Wi-Fi connectivity. Okay, for me, it's funding, both funding and research interest. Because I already had work experience before applying for a PhD position, and so I wanted to make sure that my research interest best aligned with the professor's research and also the funding opportunity. And also, it's very important for international students. They have funding here at the US. Otherwise, it's very difficult to survive, and also focusing on the research work because it might take longer than the usual time if we don't have funding. And also, it is also quite difficult to survive with the TA. We can survive with the TA for a year or a couple of semesters, but not more than that. So if we want to finish our PhD on time, at least 5 to 6 years, definitely we need RA-ship. And also it's important that we have skills where before we request the professors for funding, we definitely have to demonstrate that we have some work experience and a background in the research, and we are capable of conducting the research. So I had to give a couple of presentations to my professors on my previous work, and as well as some of the project. I also proposed some new projects, how I will contribute to their project, because my research group is interdisciplinary. I have to work with people from different background, and also my professor is from computer science, and I'm from climate science and physics. So it's important that I have I'm able to show them that I can contribute more to the project in a way that interests them more, and they'll be able to continue their support.
Thank you. I think that's a really good point, right? It's like you want to show that you're a good fit for your group, and you're like aligned with the future research goals, but also like funding trajectory. It's like maybe they just applied for a grant for this one area, and you could be like, oh yeah, that's totally what I want to do my PhD on. So that's why like talking to them and understanding like what's the landscape is important. I also want to give the Boulder Room, conference room, a chance if anybody in there wants to unmute.
Yeah, so I would say this is one of the most difficult and to answer. So it's like for me, I would say it's more of like what I am getting out of the PhD program. Maybe let's say for the undergrad student who are going to grad school, do they want to do the research, or like if they want to get a job after PhD, then maybe they can do the same job after undergrad. So that is one thing. Second thing is like the advisor is one of the most important like person to look into rather than the university or the funding position or how much contact they have and stuff, because sometimes the advisor can be too friendly or they have so many research collaborations so that you can do really well in the program rather than a new professor at a like topmost university of a apart from that, I would say like I would go with the Akila's point where she said like RA positions can be a beneficial rather than the TA ones or something of that nature. Or of course, location does not matter that much to me when it comes to that. Basically, if you are in a good place where you are more focused towards your research in your PhD, maybe, then location is not a primary factor rather than the advisor and research fit, I would say. And of course, with the current situation, the funding can be a tricky part. So if you are getting like let's say 2 offers or 3 offers, then where you are getting good funding or like continuous funding or like the project is funded for 3 or 4 years in continuously, then I would prefer that program rather than the one where it's not very clear. So and also like regarding you would like to see like let's say there are past PhD students who graduated from that department, then you can look at their profile if they are like what they are doing right now or which places they are being placed, so that that can help you identify like in which trajectory you are going into or things of that nature. So that is another thing to consider.
That's like a really good point too that I forgot to say. Like not only reaching out to the faculty, but also talking to current and former students is key, right? Like knowing the culture of the lab. Because like how on my own am I going to be, right? Do we have lab meetings where I can get constructive feedback, one-on-one meetings? Or are you just is your PI going to be off traveling for, the entirety of the year, and you'll effectively be on your own, right? So knowing that the culture, and the type of work environment you feel most comfortable in is also very important. Okay. My next question, oh, this was fun. 3, how did you prepare your application materials? So statement of purpose, CV, rec letters, etc. And I have some fun things to share on my screen, but Georgia, do you want to go first?
Yeah. And so for recommendation letters, obviously, it's important to establish connections with either advisors you have as an undergrad or your professors that you in classes that you really care about. In my time, it was like COVID, so it was harder to do that. But even just going to office hours makes a huge difference in professors wanting to write you a recommendation letter. Yeah, in terms of the personal statement and CV, I just did it. I don't know. I don't really remember. I feel like I just personal statement isn't like your undergrad essays where it's more personal to like your life experience. It's more like what you did and like your work. And then same goes for your CV, obviously. Yeah.
I don't really how to know like how to write a personal statement, sensitive statement, so I just Google As
Mm.
we don't really have LLM, so I could go and there are like people who are really nice and share their research teaching statements, teaching statements from Professor Zhang. And you can find some, can always find some.
Yeah, I guess as Chris said, there are plenty of examples for personal statements online. But what I try to do was that I just try to make them as specific for each application and research areas that specific professor was doing. As for my recommendation letters, I remember I have no specific issues. I mean, all of the letters were supportive, and yeah, not very specific.
I would say for rec letters, to echo Georgia, you know, even going to like office hours just to start a relationship with a faculty member is really helpful. Academic recommenders only for a PhD program. So something that I was contemplating, because at that point I was already, you know, running my company, is should I get a rec letter from one of like the startup incubator accelerator programs that I went through to kind of show this other side of science that I work in? And I was told absolutely not. You know, a PhD program is a research degree, faculty only. So, and I know people have different opinions on this, and I think it depends on your like experience, and maybe if you're many years out of your undergrad or master's and you're going into PhD, maybe it'd be a different story. But because I was still effectively very much so connected to my academic world, they were like, nope, faculty. I will share my screen.
Depends.
I think it depends, right? It depends, and I would say listen to your advisors and the people you trust the most. Like in my situation, it didn't make sense, but I think in other situations it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, I did the straight effort. Reach the like 60.
Okay, okay. That makes sense. So what you're looking at here is my grad school app folder that I have tucked away in my CV folder of my computer. And you could see here all 7 versions of my statement of purpose. And I think it's important to clarify here because I think there's a lot of confusion. A statement of purpose that you write for a PhD program is different than a personal statement. And I feel like a lot of people don't know the difference. So a personal statement is like a cute little story about yourself and like why you're cool. A statement of purpose is your purpose for doing a PhD. So many people don't get into PhD programs because they tend to chit chat about themselves for the whole thing instead of talking about the why they're doing a PhD program within the context of their past experiences. So again, important to remember for graduate programs, you write statements of purpose. And I have a folder for the 5 programs that I ended up applying to. And the statement of purpose I wrote for Columbia that I got in. And I talk about myself for sure, and like my foundational motivation for wanting to do a PhD, like a little bit about my story that I just told you all. But then I go right into my research interests, right? And kind of this broader contextualization about people's connection to science is due to inadequate K-12 science education. And then looking towards the future of like what I want to research, how I'm really interested in how people think and learn about ecology. I had like a policy that I picked out where I can like look into for my research. None of this is actually my dissertation, by the way. None of this. That's important to understand. That a lot of what you end up writing or thinking about in the beginning never makes it to the end in the dissertation. But this is what I thought I was going to do in 2019. And then I wrote a whole paragraph like, how do you then weave in your own experiences, right? Because you want to say how awesome you are and how you are a perfect fit to that PhD program. So then after going through my research interests and how I see my vision of the future of science education, I wrote that I'm uniquely qualified because of my previous experiences in education, ecology, and entrepreneurship. And this is where I was able to talk about my research at City College, how I do a lot of work in science communication, my company, and how I see my vision for the future with my experiences in these worlds. right? And then, like Mustafa said, it's important to make things personalized to the school. So this was my personalized to the school paragraph. So this paragraph was different for every school that I applied to. Specific to Teachers College at Columbia, I call out she is actually my PhD advisor, so that worked out well. Called out my advisor that I wanted to work with, blah, blah, blah. And then I ended with whatever, a tie the bow type of sentence. But I would say this formula works really well, right? In the first two paragraphs, you're setting the stage. Then you go into, your research interests, and it shouldn't be really about you. It should be about what you want to research, and it should align with the lab and, the types of research you want to do. Connect it back to yourself. Talk about the school. So I like to throw the mission statement of the school in there. I love doing that. It's like, oh, you Googled, you did a quick Google, and then tie it with a bow. So that was my statement of purpose. Again, many versions. This went through many hands as well. It's good to send it to your recommenders as well. Like when you ask for a letter of recommendation, you should always send your statement of purpose and your CV. This was my CV that I sent to graduate programs. And there's a difference between a CV and a resume. A resume you write to a specific job. It's typically a single page. In academia, we use CVs, and you just keep adding to them. So start one now. Like I started one when I started my RAU program, and you add on to it. And when you send to places, sometimes you edit things out that don't make sense anymore. But it's a continuous document. It's typically very long as you progress through your career of everything that you've done. So this was my CV that I applied with 2 graduate programs. I have an education section at the top, professional experience, research experience, publications, professional presentations. For me, I have a science communication section, again, because of my field, volunteer, additional work experience, professional associations, honors and awards, and skills. And you could see my CV is my current CV is still pretty much the same. It's just gotten a lot longer over the years and a lot more things added to it. But yeah, it's just a good thing to start now. While you don't really have a lot of things to add. But yeah, that's really it for what you need, right? So you need your statement of purpose, you need your CV, and 3 really solid recommendations. Sometimes there are supplemental essays you need to write. I had to also submit writing samples, but I just submitted my master's thesis for any writing samples. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing because I talked for a very long time. Akila, do you have any advice on statement of purpose, recommendations, or CV?
I think for statement of purpose, I think they look for a specific keywords. For example, I applied to UMD. I already connected with the professor, and he wanted to take me. And but in the SOP, while writing the SOP, what mistake I did is I included. I wanted to work on machine learning, and some of the words that are like too generic, and he was not working in machine learning at that point of time, and he wanted me to add to the new project, different project, but all the skills and everything, all the skills and also some of the keywords that I wrote it in the SOP was is not aligning with the project interest. So actually I couldn't get into that project, and I couldn't join the professor. So it's very important that we have keywords that are aligning with the professor's current research work or the project you are interested to work with. So so before writing the SOP, please talk to the professor, email them and ask for the project that they are looking for students or they have vacancy, and then tailor your SOP according to the professor's interest or recent publications, and also try to talk to the students, those who are working on the project currently, so they'll be able to help you little bit of like how to tailor the SOP that is what I did for while applying for PhD, and also for CV. Um, initially I didn't have any publications, so I applied with
Oh.
PhD.
While Akila figures out her Zoom volume, Boulder, do you have any thing to add?
Yeah, hello, am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
So basically, I think most of the points have been covered, but I would like to emphasize on, like, when you are writing any letter or anything, never try to use like GPT or any LLM thing, because there is a difference between when you are writing them and when like a software writes it for you. So, and like the people who are evaluating your like statements or any letters, they can differentiate because they are expert in the field, and like they know the language, human rights and stuff. So they can be differentiated very easily. So I would highly recommend not to use any such software when you are doing your applications or writing. Invest time in that and try to refine them as many times as possible. And maybe take feedback from multiple people. Like if you are having a statement SOP, a statement of purpose, then maybe show it to 4 or 5 different people and take their feedback and comment if possible. The more refined your documents are, like more chances of success is there.
That's really good advice. So right now at Teachers College, we helped create a new master's program called Sustainability in Education, and I'm on the board, like accepting the first cohort of students. We're throwing applications right in the garbage that use ChatGPT. Like you could tell immediately. The writing is just not natural. If you read enough, like all academics, we read for a living, right? So it's like it is not only like the syntax and the grammar, but also just like the generalizations that are made about the field. It's like, okay, ChatGPT, garbage, ChatGPT. So yeah, seriously, don't use it. Cool. Okay. Okay, we already covered that. I guess I'll ask one last question before I think it's important we stop talking and hear everybody else's questions in the room. Were there any surprises or things you wish you had known before applying to the PhD program? Georgia?
I didn't realize how individualistic it was going to be. I thought that like a lab would be kind of collaborating and working together, where at least in mine, everyone's kind of doing their own separate thing. And like it's very just like me, myself, and I, and then sometimes my advisor. And so it can feel a little bit lonely, especially in the beginning when you're more lost. But yeah, I don't know. But I think it's super dependent on like what program you're in.
I would go back to the number 4 question.
Yes.
Because like for most programs, you should ask like email professors saying if they have a vacancy. But for my program, my current program, this is the only program I didn't ask emails to any professor because they explicitly say that on their program it's not necessary. So that's like what happened here. And for things that surprise me, some programs don't have office space or even a desk. So that's the case in my program, and I would say for our college in general. I think it's a social science thing, and also I know in our school, the private school that would be the policy school, they also don't have like office space or desks. They have some shared space that people can bring their laptop to work with, but they don't really have a designated place for you. Yeah, that's the main thing here.
I do not have any specific thing to add to the top of what was mentioned, but I think it's always a good idea to do more research and find more advisors that are potentially relevant to your research and reach out.
For me, I'm gonna echo the sentiment here that's already been said, but that you think things are guaranteed that are just not, and it's a little crazy. So coming from the sciences, I came from a world where, everybody gets funded PhDs, and sometimes you TA, right? Sometimes you work for that money. But ultimately everybody's funded, and it is so not the case in the social sciences, including education. Um, and I ultimately had two offers on the table. One, come to Columbia, no funding guarantee. But come here and we will figure it out. Uh, and Rutgers, I had full funding 4 years, fully paid for classes, blah, 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 to be immediately brought on to a project that already exists. It was to research science learning, ecology science learning in middle school classrooms in New Jersey. Um, and like, I think, again, this was a highly, highly, highly personal decision. I wouldn't advise anybody turning down a fully funded PhD program like I did, because that's what I ended up doing. Like, ultimately, I didn't leave the pure sciences to not have creative freedom. So I chose having the freedom to design my own research project and kind of pave my own way, rather than being pigeonholed into a pre-existing project and a grant that's already been written for me, because I had already done that in my science, my time in ecology. It ended up working out. I got really lucky. As you see, I'm here at Leap. Leap funds me. But it is a gamble. So I think one of the things that surprised me is, like, one, that not every PhD is guaranteed funding. So that's why it's really important conversations, and also to understand your life circumstances. Remember, I still teach at FIT, so it's like I already have a job. So for me, it's like I was able to kind of make that gamble on funding. And two, also echoing what Georgia said, it's lonely. Um, and I think this is felt by a lot of PhD students. I've saw TikTok calling doing a PhD the loneliest degree. If you think about it, like, medical school has a cohort of students you take classes with for 4 years. Law school, 3 years, you have a cohort. You kind of like take classes for like a little bit at the beginning, and there's people you become friends with, and then you're effectively on your own for like 6 years. And it's a gamble whether anybody's around, especially if there's no lab and there's no desk space. You are just like myself. You're just alone. Like, there are weeks where I don't see or interact with human beings. So yeah, it's important to understand that going into a PhD. It's incredibly self-driven. I didn't understand before a PhD how people end up 10, 11 years in a program, like spinning their wheels trying to get to graduation. Now I am entering year 6, and I understand deeply how that can happen. So having support systems in place are important. Akila, can we hear you?
Oh, can you all hear me?
We can hear you. Great. So what's one thing that surprised you about this whole
Um,
process?
so as I mentioned before, I always had funding. I always had RAship, but full funding comes with lots of challenges because I had to work for my own dissertation project separately, and also had to contribute to two other projects that as part of the grant, because they have to report to the grant that we are funding this student and the students are contributing to that main NSF project. So that was so difficult for me because I had to register for 9 credits per semester, had to take courses, and also I had to work on my dissertation progress. It's they like when they select us as a uh, like with full RA, the professors already mentioned to me that dissertation is your duty. It's you take care of your dissertation work, but it's very important for us you make progress on the main project, the contribution for the other interdisciplinary project or the collaboration project, because that is very much needed more than the dissertation. I need to make progress to continue my funding for the upcoming semesters. So I think managing time was very difficult because I need to keep up with my coursework and also contributing to the projects. So this continued for 2 years, because until 2 years, my professor clearly told it, this is for all the students who has full RAship. they have to definitely contribute to the two other projects apart from their dissertation work to get funding continuously. And so I think for 2 years it was very stressful and so much lonely. And we had to, and also I need to be in good relationship with all the collaborators or the person who I'm reporting, because they are not my professors, the advisors or the actual professor, but they are the people those are working on different project. And but they have to report to my advisor that the student is making progress, and they are good enough to continue their support. So that was quite difficult for me because I had to work with four different members, and like research professors or those who are collaborating in that particular project. So that I was surprised because I had to go and talk to my professor that is that any way that I don't want to continue in the collaborative project, and I just focus on my research project. But it I was clearly told that you must definitely make progress on that interdisciplinary project, and I have to show everyone that I'm good at collaborating with other people. So I think that is quite new for me. I think in America, it's very important if you want to get funding, or even in job, in academia, or even in industries, it's very important we demonstrate that we are capable of working with multiple collaborators who comes from diverse field, research field, and also communicating the research to different field group members also very difficult. And I need to learn a lot of skills or vocabulary, how to convey my research like the arctic science or climate research to the people who comes from the actual computer science, or who don't know anything about the science. Like there are people who don't know anything about the science, but they are associated with the project, like social, they might come from social science, statistics, uh, and also the data science. So the data scientists, they know about data, but they really don't know much about the science. So it was that was a challenge that given to me to communicate my research work so that those two students or the research group members learn the science part of what I'm doing, and I also have to learn from them that how they interpret and communicate the science to the people, or making it like a deliverable products. So that was a huge task, and several time I wanted to come out of the project, and I really spoke to my advisor. No, I this is not working. No, every time I go and complain, my advisor used to tell, no, you have to give it a try for one more semester. I think almost I did it. And so after 2 years this continued. After that I was so given with full independence to do whatever I wanted to do for my dissertation. So I think this is so surprising thing, and I really struggled and I learned a lot from it.
That's a really good point. Like, even though I'm funded, I'm not funded to do my dissertation. I do my dissertation on my free time. Free time. It's like I'm here with you. I run the program to teach the teachers about climate change. I run a bigger collaboration with New York City Public Schools, none of which has to do with my dissertation. It's like effectively holding like two full-time jobs, and I also teach 4 classes at FIT. And then I find time to do my dissertation on top of all of that. So it's not guaranteed that you'll be funded to do your dissertation. So time management.
For my funding, I'm not doing that for my dissertation. And in our universities, some professors, I would say the majority of professors have this mindset. If this is an I-ship, the I-ship is not for your dissertation. They're separated. So like something that surprised me because that's not the system in Europe or
Yep.
okay.
Yeah, and I think you all heard Thea talk about this with when they did their grad school chat, Thea and Kate, but Thea went to, graduate school in Norway, and in Europe, a PhD is 3 years. You're in and you're out, you're brought in, there's no coursework. You're brought in to do your project, publish your papers, and you graduate. So it's a completely different academic culture and something to think about as you're applying to PhD programs. Remember, you don't necessarily need to be shackled to the US system. It depends on your research interests, and what's meaningful for you to get out of your PhD experience. I don't want to forget Boulder conference room. Any folks there want to unmute and talk about? I think there's only one PhD. Yeah, it's only you. Yeah, I keep saying anyone in Boulder, but I think it's just you in the conference room.
So basically, I can totally relate with everything that you guys said, and it's the same for every PhD program where you go through a lot. Rather than when I was applying, I also used to think that in any environment I can survive, or I am intelligent enough or hardworking enough to get through the program. But with time, you will realize every university have or every lab has a unique PhD program. So I would not count on the problems, but I would say talk to the people that are currently enrolled in the lab, maybe shoot them a message on LinkedIn or directly email them and talk to them about the requirements, prerequisites for the department, for the program, for the university, or for that specific professor you will be working with, how flexible they are with the timing, with you being present in the lab, or how much work-life balance or independence you will have joining that lab or that program. Just to give you one example, a few days back, I was talking with some of my colleagues over here. So some of the universities have a prerequisite of coursework of say 45 credits or 60 credits. However, other universities have the prerequisite coursework of hardly 25 or 30 credits. Sometimes they are also transferable from one university to another. However, at other locations, they are very rigid about that. You have to take from their university only. So those factors should be taken into consideration when you are applying for the program. Otherwise, you will end up doing only the coursework for next 2 years or so, and then you will start your research, or it influences you. And same goes with the TA points. He said if you are on a TA thing, then maybe it is so intensive that you are just doing the grading and stuff and teaching the students. That is a good thing, of course, but if you are interested in doing research, then huge amount of time gets consumed in teaching the students or grading the assignments, and your research will get delayed, and sometimes that increases the duration of PhD from 4 years to 5 years, or 5 years to 7 years. So those things should be taken into consideration before choosing a professor and stuff.
All good advice. Thank you all so much for sharing. I want to pause here for questions.
How many PhDs how many PhD programs do you guys applied to? What?
Wow. Okay, originally I was thinking 5 to 10. I think that's a reasonable amount. And then my professor said, "Are you sure you just need to apply 5 to 10? I can write more letters if you want." And in the end, he pushed me to 17.
That's crazy.
I applied to 3 programs, and those 3 were those that I had interview and had verbal confirmation that I had a chance, and that's it.
I had 5 on my list. I ended up only applying to 4, and then I only got into 2. Akila, how many programs did you apply to?
I think I applied for 3. I got 1.
Sorry, Boulder. Anybody else? How many?
So I applied to 6 programs. I got successfully 2, and one was still in talks, and I emailed them I am going for the other one.
I think
Because I did not wanted to take chances, and that was just after COVID. So I had to the funding situation was kind of weird that time. So I chose to apply to 6 of them.
I think it's abnormal to apply.
And again, to add to that, when you are applying, just see the emails, focus on the emails or replies of the professor. Sometimes they are so generic that you will feel like he just told you to apply to the program rather than just interviewing you or talking with you properly. So they can be like generic emails, or they can be specific emails to try to differentiate in the tone of the email. Like, is he happy to take you, or he just want you to apply to the program?
Yeah, it's like typically because research interests are niche at this point, you don't have like a wide breadth of programs that you're applying to. It's sometimes a little different in other fields. So for example, in biology, right? You could be applying to a biology PhD program, but not necessarily know whether you want to work on bats or bugs or plants yet. So you do what's called rotations. Did anybody here do rotations? Do you want to talk a little bit about what that is and what that means?
Yeah, so our program is required to do 3 rotations, and basically each quarter, or at least I'm on the quarter system, but each quarter you work in a different lab under a different advisor, and each lab will be a completely different environment. Like the first lab I rotated in was so big, and the advisor met with all of his grad students in one meeting once a month because that's what he had time for. And it worked essentially like a company where you're just churning out papers and you're just like a cog in the machine. The second lab was a little bit smaller, and was a good experience, but the work itself, I realized wasn't something I was interested in. And then the third lab was literally not even a lab. It was just me and my advisor. And yeah, the mentorship wasn't like my style, I guess. So basically get to experience all these different mentorship styles, lab cultures, and then I ended up in my climate data science lab, I guess, because I liked the work, I loved my advisor, and the lab culture was really good for me. And I think it's really dependent on what you like and what your style is, and if you like more, I don't know, mentorship, then you can find an advisor who's very hands-on. And if you like to just do things on your own, maybe you'd work better with someone who's more hands-on. But rotations allow you to gain that experience and explore all the options before you decide, like, this is what I want to do, even if you think that you know what you want to do beforehand.
Like in some fields, rotations are far more common than others. If you're applying to like an actual like opening into a PhD like lab, you're not doing rotations, or you're being brought immediately on into a grant. But anyway, moral of the story is usually you're applying to very few programs. It's also expensive. It's very, I know we didn't talk about this, it's very expensive to apply to PhD programs with application fees, GRE, we didn't even talk about, though the GRE I think is becoming like optional. But back when I applied to programs in 2019, everybody still needed GRE. So that's important to look at as well. Cool. Question.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask about expectations for when you're applying. I guess firstly, as far as research goes, like I know you're supposed to have research experience, but what kind of research experience are you expected to have? What's a bonus? What's nice? And I guess in addition, are there expectations that aren't really spoken about, like that you were surprised? I'm applying now. Oh shoot, I should have done this already. And you're just missing some requirement that you're expected to have.
I think research experience varies wildly, depending on the program, but I will say, you know, a PhD is a research degree, right? So in your statement of purpose, they're also looking for you to articulate that you actually understand why you want or need a PhD, right? Because a lot of people apply to PhD programs being like, yeah, this is totally the next logical step in my career, but they don't actually know why they need to do the research or do a PhD. So I would say, like, for just expectations in general, like being able to articulate why am I doing this? What is after this is important, not just for the statement of purpose, but for interviews. But for research experience, it depends on how competitive the program is and what the expectations are going into the project. But good advice that I got from my PI that I did my first master's with is, you know, when a PI is accepting you, it's like they're putting a bet on you. Like students are expensive. Like they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on you between your research, your stipend, if you're guaranteed healthcare or not, but if you get healthcare out of the gig. So they're putting a bet that you're able to execute and do the research that you're brought on to do. So they don't want somebody who has never done research a day in their life. They're also not looking for, you know, completely unrealistic expectations. It's actually the reason why I ended up tacking on my master's degree. It was part of this conversation. I don't, like, you could see Georgia went right in from an undergrad to a PhD. You don't need a master's degree beforehand. I don't think I would have gotten into my PhD programs that I got into without my master's degree, showing that I have the research chops, showing that I can publish a paper, I could defend a thesis. Coming out of an undergraduate program, you really have to show what, like, that you can do research. And to be fair, you're all in an RAU program. You're doing that now. Again, it's more common, like I know in physics, it's pretty common to go right into a PhD program out of your undergraduate. So I would say it's highly field dependent, highly grant dependent, but you definitely need to show experience. Anybody else want to chime
Yeah.
in? Yeah.
So very few time depends on that major degree. About mathematical science, probably some kind of experience like this one. If potentially one abstract, some conference that would do it, and if it is a conference with some professors, DPI know that it is killing it. Of computer science, you need a conference paper. You need a top conference paper. That's just without doubts because everyone's published. And yeah.
Anybody else want to add on to that? Research experience? That's such a tough question.
And computer science conference are very difficult. They are basically like journal papers, other things.
Yeah, that's actually surprised me going into education. I don't know if anybody here is interested in the social sciences, but it's like submitting to like ecology conferences. It's like, oh, here's an abstract. It's like, here's research I haven't even done yet. Here you go. Submitting to these education conferences, it's like writing a paper. It's like going through peer review. I'm like, what is this? This is so much work. We could talk about that when we get to conferences, but yeah, it's the culture is very different depending on the field. Any other PhD
Yeah,
questions?
I will share a
Yeah.
different experience I had 2 days back where I mentored few undergrad students with their applications for PhD in the GEM program. Okay, so the student was sharing a unique style of applying that was like when he is choosing a professor to write an email, he checks all the existing PhD student in the lab, just go through their LinkedIn profile and see and evaluate his own profile if his profile is competitive enough with all the students in the lab, like if he is a good, like he has that much of research experience or like the academic or co-curricular activities he have compared to the students getting selected in that lab, then he will approach the professor. Otherwise, if he feels like that is not very competitive, then he will skip that lab, something of that nature. Or like if he is overqualified for that lab, then also he will not approach the professor.
I'm sharing my screen again just to show how I articulate. So this is the CV I applied with. And you could see under my research experience, like I wrote like my REU, NSF funded, right? Another program that I was funded through, NIH funded. It is very brief. And then you could see here, I have all of my conferences I've presented at Cited. I had one publication in prep. I had no publications yet applying into my PhD programs. But I think how you talk about your research experience matters, right? And showing like, hey, I've done something that's NSF funded. I've even done something that's NIH funded. Like showing like you've had like, and you've talked at you have conference papers, right? You have like a diversity of experience. Like you show them you could do the thing. Cool. Any other questions from the REU students on PhD?
This one's not necessarily about PhD applications, more so about PhD program. So it sounds like there's just a lot to do in the PhD program, and everyone has different timelines. But what are the different like stages of the PhD program that are kind of shared?
Cool. So, every PhD program is different, but typically you have qualifying exams. So not every PhD program has this though, but sometimes it's called quals or your cert or your first year exam. It has different names depending on the school. But typically after your first year, for me, it was in year 3. So again, it's very different. After you're done with your coursework, you take a comprehensive exam that shows that you're competent in your field. It's typically a broad range of questions in your field. It's not specific to your research interests. But that's like a first stage. Not all programs had this. I have a good friend who is a biomedical engineer. He did not have qualifying exams. But every PhD program has a dissertation proposal. So you typically in years 1 through 3 at some point you do your quals. Then maybe year 2, maybe year 3, you're going to do your proposal defense. And sometimes, like for me, I had to write my proposal, which is the first 3 chapters of my dissertation, submit it to my first 2 readers of my committee, and then got feedback from them, and then you do an oral defense. It's different depending on the program, but it's in that moment where if you pass that, where you're no longer a PhD student, you're a PhD candidate. And that's for every PhD program, typically. So exam, PhD, proposal, submission, and then the next thing that you have to do is your dissertation defense. It's the end. So it's kind of these chunks where it's like coursework to first exam or cert or qualifier, your proposal, which is like outlining your introduction, lit review, and methodology for your dissertation. Once that's approved, you do the dissertation, and then you defend the dissertation at the end. I'm assuming everybody here knows what a defense is, but should I explain what I mean when I say defense? Cool. So sorry. So I had to defend my master's. It's not sometimes you don't have to defend a master's, but everybody defends a PhD. So it's not like graduating with an undergraduate degree where you do your X amount of credits and you're done. To get a PhD, your committee, which is a group of 5 faculty members that you get to choose. So that's great. So sometimes you don't actually, but typically you choose. And they're the ones who deem whether you are worthy to get a PhD. So it's not, graduating with all your credits. It's this committee of 5. And one of those 5 is your advisor. Typically, you work closely with maybe 1 to 2 or 3 of these folks. You'll have an external reader that comes in, a rando for 4th. So it's rare you're close to all of these people. But it's what you do is you essentially are in a room with them. You give a short presentation, you give a talk, and then you defend why you deserve your degree. So they basically ask you questions, and you answer them to the best of your ability. Every institution is different. At Columbia, a defense can't go longer than 2 hours, which I think is rare because I remember at City College, like PhD defense was going all friggin' day. They break for lunch. So I think it's highly dependent on the institution. They cap it at 2 hours here. And then basically you are kicked out of the room. I was a nervous wreck during my master's. I was like practically shaking when I was kicked out of the room. And then you're brought back in and they tell you whether you passed with minor revisions, passed with major revisions, or you failed. Typically, if you know, you're not getting to a defense if you're going to fail it, right? So no good advisor will let you walk into that room if you're going to fail. Like you walk into that room knowing that you're going to get a PhD at the end of that 2 hours. The question is, how badly will your reaming be with the questioning? Defenses tend to be like a sometimes you get like a cult of personality going in your defenses, especially if you have like a lot of like faculty that don't necessarily agree with each other, they end up fighting with each other instead of asking you questions, which is, I hear, a best case scenario in a PhD defense from friends of mine who have gone through the process. So, and sometimes you're asked ridiculous questions, and remember, like, these are for a lot of the time, people who have worked with you, they know what you don't know, right? Especially your advisor, right? They know what you don't know. So they're going to ask you that exact question, what you don't know, right? So it's really how best you can answer it. During my master's defense, I was asked like a ridiculous question by one of my committee members, like there is no answer to. My thesis focused on like differences in like beetle host specialization between thick and thin branches in neotropics. So my committee member was like, so you talk a lot about these, thick and thin branches. Can you estimate the ratio of thick to thin branches in every forest on Earth? Obviously, like I'm sitting here, right? Like I'm sitting like, yeah. So I bullshitted an answer, right? It's like I talked about like primary and secondary forest and blah blah blah. But like ultimately there are questions that you'll get asked that they don't even know the answer to. They're just looking to see how you answer questions, and that's part of being an academic. But yes, to answer your question, you're gonna, do this exam, you're gonna do a proposal with possibly a defense, with a big defense at the end. Did anybody have unique experiences in their program? Yeah.
Very similar. I don't have like a defense exam. I have a proposal defense, and after that, I got called candidate. That means something in U.S. academia. I have coursework about 2 years. Sometimes it can go 3 years, depends on the schedule. For my program, the coursework is fixed. But for other programs, you get to choose your own course depending on field. And then I got to the proposal defense, and I have to assemble the 5-person committee. That can be tricky sometimes. You get to that after you defend the proposal, you are a candidate, and that's like somewhat safe because you only need to finish your dissertation and because they already somewhat agree on the proposal. So yeah, that's already good news. And now 2 years of doing your own research.
In my program, you don't take your qualifying exam until your 4th year. So I haven't even taken it.
So again, wildly different. And sometimes the qualifiers don't even exist. And also what the comprehensive exam is completely different. So my first exam were 2 prompts on my field written to my entire like cohort. So 30 pages each, so 60 pages of writing, and you have 2 weeks to do it. So your life effectively gets upended for 2 weeks. You clear the schedule. Ahead of time, at least the dates. But for example, I have a best friend who has a PhD in physics. It's a 3-day exam, 8 hours a day in a room, pen and paper, in all areas of physics from, mechanics to E&M. It's like stuff that you might not even focus on for your area of research, but hence the name comprehensive exam. It's on the entirety of the field of physics, and he failed one part by 2 points. He was able to retake it, which again, it's kind of funky whether you're allowed to retake it, but he was able to. But yeah, so it's highly dependent on the field. Did you have to take an exam?
Yeah, ours was 4 days, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. To respond to each of my advisors each day. And after that, I had my proposal defense. Then I have my quals defense. So for those 4 days that I provided answer, I was supposed to defend them in an in-person session. And then I had proposal defense, and ahead of me, I have my dissertation.
Cool. Any other RU questions? I know we only have like 20 minutes, but I do want to talk briefly about conferences, which I do have a couple questions about. I guess we can lump these first 2 together. When did you go to a conference for the first time, and what was the experience like? And how did you find out about conferences in the first place? Georgia.
my first experience of it, like speaking at a conference
It could be
was
either. Like, when did you first attend one and when did you first speak at one?
the first time I attended one was I think my first year of my PhD. Um, yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I'm kind of jumbled, but yeah, and then I guess the most notable thing was just like the anxiety and imposter syndrome I felt speaking and having a poster and all of those things. But it's also kind of a validating experience because people ask questions, people are inquisitive, people care, and also are helpful and give them your or give you their input. Um, and yeah.
I have a weird experience. Like my first paper is written for conference papers, but I didn't go to that one. Going to in-person conferences cost money. So in the end, someone else did that for me. And then COVID hit. So during COVID, everything's on Zoom. I've been Zooming a lot of conferences, but I wouldn't consider that like real. Like you just don't get that experiences. And my first conference had to happen in 2023. That's the end of my second year. And the first conference I go to, I got oral presentations, so that's also a little bit funky. Normally you would get poster first. I did like after 3 of my oral presentation, I only have like 1 poster in the end last year. And that's like the first time I actually designed a poster and have everything written out. And I realized, oh, I didn't know how to do that. Because I like the first 3 conferences I went to, they are all oral presentation, just give talk. Yeah, so that's weird. But there's no COVID anymore, I think.
No.
You wouldn't have like this weird experience.
So for my master's back in Iran, I attended 5 or 6 conferences, but for my PhD, I just attended one conference in Atlanta, and I had poster presentation, and yeah, it was such a good experience.
I think I'm a little abnormal with the amount of conferences I went to as an undergraduate. I went to a lot of conferences. I was like doing the circuit. But basically after my RU program, I used it as a springboard to submit to conferences. Some of the conferences I went to were geared towards undergrads, to be fair, and I was in a program which was just defunded by the Trump administration, so it no longer exists, called Mark Rise, which basically gives underrepresented groups in the sciences funding, undergraduates funding to go to conferences. So I was incredibly lucky that I had funding as an undergraduate to go to conferences, which I don't have now. The So I went to a conference called Abercams, which is the annual biomedical research conference symposium, something like that. But I'm not a biomedical person. It's just across the board on a huge undergraduate science conference. If you ever have the chance to go, it's fantastic. There are friends that I made that now have PhDs, but I met them as undergrads from all over the country. A great opportunity. But I also went to professional, more entomology focused conferences with my research group, my lab, because everybody was presenting in a symposia on wood boring beetles, and I got to talk too. So again, a little abnormal, but I presented both oral presentations and posters as an undergraduate and a master's student, and also as a PhD student.
So since I had funding through NSF, we are always told to attend either AGU or AMS every year. So I got to do poster presentation in both in AGU and AMS, and most of the time, like people those who come and ask questions are experts in that field of research. Initially, I was not knowing much. Although I work on that project, I contribute a piece of work, but I won't be able to answer all the questions. But it was great experience that we learn actually by talking to people and trying to answer their questions, although we didn't understand completely. So that is how I started to learn, and also networking with different people, those who are working on that project, and asking them for
Cool. Boulder?
So during my undergrad or like during my master's, I did not go to many conferences, but I would give an useful information to like IGUs that I also said to few people over here, like you can do the conferences online as well if you do not get a chance to attend it in person due to some funding reasons or other. One of the good conferences is European Geophysical Union EGU1, where you can do online just for free. Like they waive the application fee, registration fee, and everything for undergrads. Even in AGU, like which is kind of prestigious in our field, you can apply for the like application fee waiver, like registration fee waiver and stuff, and you can present to them also for free if you are doing online. And even sometimes for offline they have travel grants that you can apply, and they give you like $1,000 to $1,500 for your travel and registration. So do check out for those options, and like they encourage undergraduate presenters over there, so that can help you a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, similarly to our one slide, one pitch, I know I said this, but learning how to talk about your work is key. Like this is something that follows you for the rest of your life, and it doesn't matter if you in academia, right? In any sector, you need to know how to talk about to people about your work. Um, and typically when you apply to conferences, again, the types of proposals are wildly different. I know we touched on this during the PhD talk. Sometimes it's just an abstract, sometimes it's a full paper. It depends on the society. Um, and you're typically accepted to either do an oral presentation, which will be like in front of a room with like, a time limit with Q&A. And sometimes it's a poster where it's like a big poster that you stand in front of that has your research on it, and people kind of come and go and talk to you. So it's two very different styles. And I will say some of these larger professional societies have like undergraduate symposia that you can apply to directly. So it wouldn't be like, like the wood borer symposia that I spoke at. It would be like undergraduate poster session or undergraduate oral presentations. And that's great just to meet like other undergrads, but also get that type of experience. Cool. Connect with. Okay, I know we only have 10 minutes, but I guess we'll just talk about this question. How do you prepare for presenting at a conference, either poster or an oral presentation, and what helps you feel confident in that type of setting? Georgia.
I practiced and practiced and practiced in front of my family, in front of all my friends, people who had no idea what I was talking about. And I would ask them to stop me every time they didn't understand so that I would be able to find either holes in my logic or convey things better. And then I also presented in front of my lab who had some baseline understanding. And they gave me good feedback. And yeah, I think that's the best way to do it.
Different strategy. So I would have an entire script written out what I want to say, entirely written out, especially in the early stages. And like make English not my first language, so that's like really important. And then you memorize everything, you try to present it. I would stay in a meeting with like someone like that and just do it as like their audience. And then I will record myself.
Yeah.
And I will listen back. Because like when you listen back, what you've been saying is very different from like what you're listening right now, and you would know, okay, that's not okay. That's something I want to change.
So I found out whenever I'm not practicing for an oral presentation, I'm doing better. Just something counterintuitive, but it just happens. And just one thing to add, the AGU's conference for abstract submission deadline is by the end of this month. So if any of you are interested to submit your abstract, deadline is Wednesday, July 30th. seniors.
Yeah, I thank you for bringing that up. My biggest piece of advice for conferences, get on email lists. So all of these societies that you hear people talk about, AMS, AGU, things maybe more specific to your field or what you study. Like for example, if you're in marine bio, there are marine bio specific societies that you should be a part of. Sign up for their email list because typically the abstracts for conferences are due over the summer for the things that are going to happen next academic year, or in the spring.
Find those.
So you just go to the website. So you would just go to like AMS and you would like sign up for their emails, or you become a member, right? And as an undergraduate, it's sometimes free, or exceptionally cheap. Become a member. You're gonna have to become a member regardless if you plan on submitting. So it's like become a member, it's free or cheap. So you get those emails, so you know when things are due. Um, I'm with you. I don't practice. I I I'm a very chat if you couldn't tell, I'm a very chatty presenter. So I'm at a conference presenting in the same way I would talk to like my undergraduate students, and I'm not sure if that's necessarily a good thing. Um, but I think it's every professional society is also very different, right? Like the education people are chill. The bug people tend to be chill. I hear in other fields, like one of my advisor likes to talk about like the sociology people, insane, apparently really mean. So like I think, it depends on, what you're presenting and what you're doing, but I think you should always practice. Like I think it's rare that you're just like good out the gate. And I really like what Georgia said. Like I have practiced with my family and my friends who have like no knowledge of my work, and I find it exceptionally helpful to get questions from people that are not in the sciences. Akila?
I think I also practice with my friends from different department or different program. So they give me a lot of feedback because they don't understand my subject matters, and also mostly mine is technical work. So when I present that to the people, those who don't know the technical, or those who don't know the like a mathematics, physics, or computer science, right? So I really have to be so careful in explaining my work to them. So that is how I started to practice. Also practicing with our group members, lab members, that helps a lot to correct some of the important things. If I have any mistakes in my presentations or posters, they can help me with that. And to really present to the big, like a broad audience, it's important that we practice with someone who don't know our research work or who comes from different background. Even you can practice with your mom or dad or family members. That also will help because they don't know anything about our work or research. So that will help us to improve our way of explaining and understanding.
It's a really good point. And I would say, like, also who you're presenting to matters, right? So when I'm talking at like the wood borers symposium, I'm not going to go, what is a beetle? Like, why you should care about wood boring beetles? Because everybody in that room has like a PhD in wood boring beetles, right? But if I'm talking to maybe a more general science audience, I would back up like 15 steps and start my talk a little differently, right? And contextualize it a bit. So, like, not all conferences are also created equal in who has who has your specialty, right? So you craft your messaging accordingly. Boulder.
How you prepare for
So basically, I do not have any specific point on this, but I would again emphasize on the point like if you get a chance to present a poster or something, do that. Even like if you are a co-author on some poster, do that because it, as Christina was saying before, like it adds to your CV and it stays there as long as you are in the academia, and it keeps getting piled up and keeps getting added on your CV, and adds weight to the application you do either now after PhD or even in your job. So if you get a chance to present it a poster or like be a co-author in someone's poster, do that. And second thing is like for AGU, as you were saying, like sometimes it's free. Even if it's not free, just write an email to them for the waiver. If you feel like you cannot pay, let's say $30, then you can email them and they most likely waive your like what you call membership fee or abstract submission fee. So try to write an email to them if you feel like you cannot pay.
And I will say, like, all of you are a resource to each other, right? Like, I'm still friends with people that I did my REU with 10 years ago. So, conferences, collaborating for research, even jumping on a Zoom with each other to practice talks, like that, you all are a resource for each other as well. Questions? I know we only have like 3 minutes, but questions on conferences or PhD things in general?
So I'm not really that familiar with conferences. So you have your poster, right? And it's basically like a Q&A for whoever's interested passing by.
There's an art to a poster presentation. So, yes, but typically you're going to present to them, right? They're not just going to stand there and read as you sit there, as you stand there silently and wait for questions. This is why the 1 minute, 1 slide pitch that we did is part of your REU program, because you're going to have less than a minute to like grab their attention, get through the points of this research, and then they're going to ask questions. And then you could like dive in a little deeper into data analysis or methods if they ask you those questions. But no, you're going to present to them, and it's going to be like an elevator pitch.
Oh no, this has been really comprehensive. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Do you guys have any questions?
Anybody else? Questions?
I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah, maybe. Well, thank you all for listening. I hope this was informative. Again, we're all here as a resource. If you think of any questions, let us know. As you're, maybe writing your first abstract to a conference or thinking more critically about PhD programs, we're here. I'm not going anywhere. So feel free to shoot us an email, and I know I am, and I'm sure everybody else is more than happy to give you feedback on a statement of purpose, on your CV, on an abstract. I'm always more than happy to send back track changes. Okay. Have a great rest of your afternoon. Bye, everybody. Bye, Boulder.